Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend-Guard, your host, and I just want to quilt. So today I'm super psyched. We are talking to Scott Fortunoff. He is a fourth generation fabric person. His family owns a variety of different fabric companies all under one rubric, Jaftex. Jaftex is also the company that is purchasing Free Spirit. Free Spirit is the company that has Tula Pink and a bunch of other really famous designers and quilters. And they just announced a few days ago that they'll be purchasing Free Spirit, including all the people that are already there. Jaftex is a super interesting company. The fabric lines include Henry Glass, Studio E Fabrics, The Blank Quilting Company, Fabric Editions, and A.E. Nathan. So we interviewed Scott about a week before the announcement. So we are very, very interested in having him back to tell us about how that all happened. And here's the interview to get to know a little bit more about Scott and his company, who are now going to be taking over Free Spirit.
This is Scott Fortunoff. I'm in New York City, 49 West 37th Street on the 14th floor.
So tell me your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life.
Oh, man. Well, can I answer a different question? The first time I heard about fabric?
Sure.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, my dad would bring homework home, and during the summers we would work in the office. But back then the business was really more manufacturing and not sewing. Sewing really, to be honest, was probably closer to when I came into the business about around 12 years ago.
Interesting.
That was really when it was more about sewing and quilting.
Okay, so let's go back to when you were a kid. What did they make you do? So I had to work my dad still is an attorney, and I remember having to go into the office and photocopy and do all kinds of ridiculous things. I must have been like 8, and I was always told how fun it was to get me to do ridiculous things. What did you do when you went to the office as a kid?
Well, back in those days, we used to have a sample room. Definitely worked with the sample people. Did some order entry things, more clerical, whatever they needed me to do, sort of stuff. A lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
Going to appointments, things like that. One actually interesting thing, I'll try to sneak the interesting stuff in. When I was in high school, about 10th or 11th grade over the summer, my dad, at that time we had 2 plants that we owned in the Carolinas, and my dad sent me for the summer to work at the plants. My brother did the same thing. He wanted us to see that, it's not all about being spoiled living in New York, and there are other people. And, when you call down to the plant and say, can you do this and do that? There are actual people doing it. And, he just wanted me to kind of see from the ground up what went on. And that's a totally different perspective. And it certainly was eye-opening, to say the least.
So for people that might not know who you are, you come from a family of people who manufactured, sold fabric, and all kinds. You're a fourth generation textile person.
Yep.
Is that right?
And we're almost 90 years old.
Amazing.
Right.
So Tell me, how does it feel to be part of that? Did you always know you were going to go into the family business, or did you try to escape? If they were making a movie of your life, what would the movie be?
Well, it's a very controversial subject in my family, because my brother's older than me. He went to Syracuse and loved the stock market, but he came into the business for a very brief stint, and then he did all this other stock market stuff, and then he came into the business about 3 years ago. So he came back. For me, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I went to college, but it was senior year, And I remember calling my parents and saying, all right, I think it's time for me to come to the business. I was excited. And then, I went out with my friends. Next day I come home and my mom is calling me on the phone telling me, business has been tough. This is when the manufacturing was going to China. And long story short, I ended up going to law school.
You did? Oh, that's right. We talked about this at Cardozo, right?
Yes, I went to Cardozo. So that was kind of, I always refer, I don't know if you read any of my blogs yet, but I always refer back to the road less traveled and kind of how I took the road less traveled by going to law school, but I ended up back on the same road that I probably would have gone on in the first place, which is kind of ironic because I ended up in the family business anyhow. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So that's what. So I worked in the stock. So I did
after law school. Yep. So you went to law school. Did you focus on anything in particular?
More securities law was my interest at that time. Yeah, I started the Securities Law Society at my school, but I hated it. I really didn't like law school. I would like those 3 years back, but I did it. I survived. I passed the bar, and that was the end of my career. Then I went into stocks, and about 8 or 10 years into that, it was getting extremely difficult and stressful. And my dad said, "Why don't you come work in the business?"
And so, what did you do when you get that call? What does that mean to work in the business? What does what does that mean at that time? Like, what did you do when your dad?
So at that time, we had Henry Glass selling to quilt shops, and actually at that time they sold a little bit to the chains as well. And then we had A. Nathan, which is another one of our division, and a couple other divisions that are probably gone. But so when I came in, I trained under a gentleman named Don Edwards. He was nearing in on 80, so the plan was basically he would trade me for a year and change and then kind of wean down and retire. So I was trained to run the A. Nathan division, which focused mainly on the chain stores. This is when the chain business was really amazing and big, and a lot of licensed products we offered, whether it was Dora and SpongeBob or Nickelodeon and different licenses like that. So he stayed for a year. He trained me, and then I just took over A. Nathan, and I did that for a while. And then we bought Fabric Editions. That's a company in Greenville, and they had two divisions. They had a chain division and a mom and pop division. The mom and pop division was Studio E. And since I had been working with the chains, I told my dad I wanted to learn the quilt shop side because I thought that would be the future. So we took Studio E from them and we brought it up to New York. And then we developed Studio E, and I'm the president of Studio E. And then we did the same thing with Blank Quilting. We bought them, and then we moved them into our New York office, and I'm president of Blank Quilting as well. I have a lot of titles, so they don't mean that much, but they're titles nonetheless, and I guess I'm the go-to guy when one of those companies has an issue.
It's so amazing. So let's take us back. So tell me a little bit about the family. So tell me about fabric and your family and sort of how it's sort of shifted over time. It seems like, so what we want to do with this interview is I want to understand sort of, kind of a short history of fabric and your family, and then kind of what happens now. And then I have specific, ridiculous questions to ask you about. So, and obviously I think there's also, one of the big questions, and maybe we can even start with this, is the difference between fabric at shops and fabric at places like Joann's and Walmart. And you sell at both spaces, right?
Right.
So how are they different? Because there's all this sort of talk about that, of like, where do you buy your fabric and how is it different? And I'm really curious what your thoughts are about that.
Well, why don't I take you back a little bit, since you're, no offense, I think you're a little bit new to this.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I started, companies who now sell to quilt shops only sold to the chains and to quilt shops. So basically there was the chains and the quilt shops, but more or less what was happening was Walmart or Joann's would be selling the fabric for they'd be buying it at whatever price and selling it, let's say at $3.50 a yard, and the quilt shops were paying $3.25 a yard to buy it and then resell it at $6 or $7.
But
So
was it the same? Was it the same fabric, or were they making?
Yes, in some cases it was the same products.
Really?
So finally, the quilt shop said, this is nonsense. This doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
And then at that time, the dichotomy had developed where we separated. You either sell to quilt shops or you sell to chains. And their companies like A. Nathan and our other division, Fabric Editions, they both sell to both, but everyone knows. You know what you're getting into. You know that if you buy it, it's potentially in one of the chains as well, but you're okay with it. You think you could still sell it.
Yeah.
Or the prices have changed up a little where they're a little bit closer now. But that was the big sticking point. Like a lot of the quilt shops were saying, we can't compete with them. This is nonsense. So then we said, all right, this is it. We're quilt shops only, no more chains. So now Henry Glass, Studio E, and Blank Quilting do not sell to any of the U.S. chains.
Why?
Because of the pricing issue. Because, they buy such volume. A quilt shop buys a bolt of every, a group, 10 pieces in a group. Walmart buys 10 pieces of the group for, 3,000 stores, and they're obviously getting much better pricing.
Right.
And the quilt shops can't compete with that.
And why?
So it's really just a pricing thing.
Got it. And why is it important to have, it seems like Walmart's an easier relationship and customer in the sense of you're dealing with one person and 3,000 shops versus 3,000 shops and three different people in each shop. So why be in that market as well as the big box stores?
Oh man,
is that a hard question?
You know what? Listen, I'm in the business to sell fabric. I want to try to sell to everyone I can.
Right.
And listen, the chains have become extremely challenging to work with. They know the pricing now. In the past, they didn't really know the pricing.
Yeah.
So there's really no leverage. I mean, if you're okay making potentially a low margin, maybe even something in the single digits, which you have to decide if that's worth it in the end, because there are costs of doing business with them. They ask you to do a lot of things, a lot of work. They try to transfer the work onto you. The quilt shops, we get a better margin. We have or the risk is more spread out. If one quilt shop goes out of business, so maybe they stick us for $5,000, that would be a lot. But Walmart says we're out. We got Hancock Fabrics. They went out of business twice. And we got stuck with hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses because, so it's, the good and the bad of working with the chains. If they're healthy and they're ordering from you and paying decent prices, you're fine.
Yeah.
But the other side is, nowadays the prices they're paying are lower and they're very aggressive and they want a lot of concessions. And, I feel like the few that are left are you got Joann's, Walmart, Hobby Lobby. Michael's dabbling a little bit. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, we lost a lot of big customers along the way, and it's always changing, when new, chains go away, and then you have something like a fabric.com who was bought by Amazon, or a Missouri Star who comes in and really, they're innovators and disruptors is the word I'm looking for.
Do you see like Craftsy.com being a disruptor too?
Craftsy, we don't sell to them. They're more controversial because they're almost like selling to the chains. They really anger the quilt shops, so we tried to stay away from them.
Super interesting. So what I find so fascinating, again, we have to go back to to do the other questions, but what I think is so interesting is that that the industry still has. I mean, you have the big box stores, but the fact that these are just little shops, that's the business. That there's all these different little shops with different personalities. Why do you think that has happened? Like, why hasn't there been like a group coming in to have franchised quilt shops? That we're staying in this kind of very mom and pop industry across the board. Do you have any idea about that?
It's a good question. Listen, there are customers like there's Beverly's. Beverly's is out of California. She has like 15 stores, or maybe she's going down these days because I think California was really struggling badly. I'm not really sure. I guess it's kind of maybe, to be honest, it's the reason why people are against like a Walmart these days, because there's no one there to cut. When a quilt shop, you get that personal help and someone who